name is Vanessa Lewis from Columbus State University, and I'd like to tell you about a really exciting project. This project was put together by a group of education students led by Student Government Vice President Ian Torrey. Columbus is such a beautiful place, and this project gives the city another opportunity to do something fabulous. Where was the last battle of the Civil War fought? Petersburg, Appomattox Courthouse, Palmetto Ranch, Texas? According to the official records, the closing conflict of the Civil War occurred right here on the banks of the Chattahoochee River in Columbus, Georgia. A group of education students at Columbus State University, led by Ian Torrey, would like to preserve and memorialize this important piece of land in order for our students, our children, and our great-grandchildren to learn, experience, and appreciate what happened here on that fateful Easter day.
Okay, now let me give you a basic narrative of the battle. Less than half of the Confederate military forces surrendered with Robert E. Lee on April 9, 1865 at Appomattox Courthouse. General Johnston still had nearly 100,000 Confederates prepared for battle. His men did not lay down their arms until April 26, 1865. The last battle of the Civil War, prior to the final surrender, occurred 10 days earlier at Columbus, Georgia. You're probably familiar with Sherman's March to the Sea. He burned Atlanta, and on the way to Savannah, he implemented his scorched earth policy. There was a similar raid through Alabama, led by General James Wilson. After defeating General Nathan Bedford Forrest at the Battle of Selma, Alabama on April 2, 1865, Union troops under General Wilson moved eastward towards Georgia. They arrived at the border towns of Columbus and West Point at midday on Easter, the day following Lincoln's death. Over a period of about 10 hours, several thousand combatants engaged in a chaotic contest over control of the two bridges that provide entry from Alabama into Georgia.
I'm standing on the Georgia side of the lower bridge, where the first part of the battle took place. The Confederates put cotton soaked with turpentine at the bottom of the lower bridge. As Wilson's men tried to cross, the rebels set it on fire. After this bridge was burned, the remainder of the battle would take place near the upper bridge. Notice how close Columbus State is to this part of the battlefield. That is another reason why we at Columbus State are so enthusiastic about this project. We're now on the Alabama side of the upper bridge, where the fighting continued. At this location, Colonel John Pemberton brought his mounted Columbus Guards. He got into a sword fight with Yankee cavalry and was slashed and shot. As a result of his wounds, he used morphine to deal with the pain. After the battle, Pemberton returned to this house. As a pharmacist, Dr. Pemberton knew that morphine was tremendously addicting and not an optimal treatment for pain. In his quest for an alternative to morphine, he arrived at the formula for French wine coca, better known today as Coca-Cola. If it weren't for Colonel Pemberton being wounded in the Battle of Columbus, you may have never known the world's most famous soft drink. Now let's return to the Georgia side of the upper bridge. Here, at the edge of the upper bridge, General Robert Toombs placed two cannon facing west. Toombs distinguished himself at the Battle of Antietam when he slaughtered Yankee soldiers crossing the infamous Burnside Bridge. Had Toombs had it his way, this day would have been another Antietam. The climax of the battle occurred right here on the upper bridge. At the time, the bridge was enclosed and unlit, and the opposing forces fought in complete darkness. Toombs could have easily fired the two cannon that were placed right here, filled with canister, into the darkness of the upper bridge. But he opted not to, because the Confederate soldiers, along with the Yankee soldiers, were coming up across the bridge, and he did not want to murder his own men. As Union Commander General James Wilson crossed this bridge, rebel forces shot his horse from underneath him. By 11 o'clock p.m., almost all of Wilson's men had crossed the upper bridge and entered Columbus. It was right here on Mott's Green where the Confederates put up their last fight on the Georgia side of the Chattahoochee River. General Wilson made this house his headquarters during the occupation of Columbus. The owner of this house was Randolph Mott. Although he lived in Columbus, he was not a loyal Confederate. He waved the American flag up on his cupola. His son, however, was a soldier in the Confederate Army, and he served under General Henry Benning. The Mott experience shows a powerful example of how the U.S. Civil War tore families apart, son against father and brother against brother. Another really important piece to the story has to do with the ship called the Wanderer. The Wanderer was among the last illegal African slave trading ships. On Mott's screen, there are a couple of connections between the Wanderer and the Battle of Columbus. Colonel Lamar, the owner of the last illegal slave ship, met his fate and perished right here at the end of the Civil War. Frank Barnbush, one of the last African slaves brought aboard the Wanderer, served in this house under Randolph Mott and witnessed the end of the Civil War. So far, the setting of the narrative has taken place right here on the edge of the Chattahoochee River. Now let's take a look at a few other locations in Columbus that are very important to this story. Just a stone's throw away from the battlefield is the location of the home of General Henry Benning. General Benning served under Robert E. Lee and was present at the Great Battle of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Benning was also at Lee's side at Appomattox Courthouse when General Lee surrendered to General Grant. In Columbus and across the nation, he is known as the namesake of one of the largest military reserves, Fort Benning, which is located just a few miles from here. Horace King, genius bridge builder, was born a slave, achieved emancipation, and rose to high political office during Reconstruction. The two bridges, where the high points of the Battle of Columbus occurred, were designed and built by former slave Horace King. Today, this is all that is left of the lower bridge that he built here. Exactly 1 year after the April 26th surrender, Columbus was the site of the first Confederate Memorial Day. It took place right here at this location. The day was suggested by a Columbus woman by the name of Lizzie Rutherford. In Pennsylvania, a similar day was set aside to honor Yankee soldiers, and for 100 years, the North and the South held different Memorial Days. In 1970, the 2 days were converged into the Memorial Day that we hold today. Now let me tell you how the story concludes. Wilson was victorious. 150 men fell as casualties and 1,200 men were taken as prisoners. The day after the battle, Yankees torched all Confederate property, institutions, and operations that could extenuate the war. This included the recently constructed ironclad ship CSS Jackson, which would have been a powerful weapon for the Confederacy if it had launched into service. After Wilson and his Yankees finished subjugating Columbus, they moved eastward to Macon. Within the following month, they captured Confederate President Jefferson Davis at Irwinsville, Georgia, south of Macon.
There is another really important reason for the Battlefield Preservation Project. Columbus has launched a $23 million whitewater rafting plan that will be completed in 2012. It is targeted to bring 200,000 new visitors to the region every year. Providing a battlefield site to visit will give potential visitors a stronger motive to come to Columbus. Here's another important consideration. Hundreds of visitors travel from the Atlanta airport to Fort Benning every day in order to visit their sons and daughters. These are military families, many of whom are likely to have an interest in military history. A sign such as this out on I-185 is sure to draw some of these Fort Benning visitors into downtown Columbus. As the Whitewater Project is about to commence, now is the time to also begin the battlefield preservation. These projects are perfect complements to each other at this point. But if this opportunity is not seized now, studies show that the planned revitalization of the area may soon make it impossible to preserve the battlefield if the project is delayed.
You know, it wasn't too long ago that most of America's battlefields were in rural areas. But of course, in the last 10 or 20 years, that's all changed. The facts are now most of them are in suburban areas. And it's really going to be our generation that saves those battlefields, or they're not going to be saved. I mean, we are literally running out of time. 10 years, 15 at the most, and in some cases even less than that. It's going to be up to our generation to save that important part of our American history, or there's not going to be any other opportunities. It's really a question of saving it now or watching it be paved over.
I am standing where the American Civil War came to its violent end. It is imperative that we preserve this sacred piece of geography for my future students, for your children, and for all generations.
The night they drove old Dixie down, and all the bells were ringing. The night they drove old Dixie down, and all the people were singing. They went na 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 na. The night they drove old Dixie down, and all the bells were ringing. The night